Everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Kate Kuzminski. I'm the Senior Fellow and Program Director of the Military Veterans and Society Program at the Center for New American Security. CNAS is committed to bold, innovative, and bipartisan research that drives the national security policy forward. The Military Veterans and Society Program focuses our research on military personnel, veterans, and the civil-military relationship. Our program explores how the military services can recruit and retain the talent necessary to fight and win the nation's future wars. As part of our research, we examine the effect of policies, practices, and elements of service culture that enable or constrain the service's access to talent. We further explore how the services and DoD may draw from a talent pool that reflects the society from which it is drawn, particularly as there is a limited pool of qualified candidates for military service. A key part of our mission is to elevate underrepresented voices and perspectives of service members and veterans in order to provide perspective and a human element to our policy research. As part of our work, we are hosting today's panel discussion to commemorate Black History Month. This event is the sixth and final in a year-long series of veteran author panels under the umbrella of our Elevating Diverse Voices initiative. We have an excellent lineup of veteran authors on this panel. After the moderated discussion, we will open the floor for audience questions. So feel free to use the chat and Q&A functions within the webinar to submit your questions throughout the panel discussion. This event is being recorded and the audio will be released as a CNAS podcast and as a CNAS on the CNAS website in the coming weeks. A reminder that the opinions expressed during this panel are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect that of their employers or of CNAS. We are joined today by three members of the Black veteran community. We are proud to partner with Daniele Anderson, who is moderating today's discussion. Danielle is a former naval officer, a cancer survivor, a writer, and the co-founder of the Black Veterans Project, an organization that engages in research, advocacy, and litigation to address systemic racial inequities across the military and veteran landscape. Welcome, Danielle. I'll hand it over to you to introduce our panelists.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Kate. I'm really excited to be here and excited to spend some time speaking with these two amazing panelists. There is such a power in writing, I think no matter the form, but so rarely do we talk about the impact writing has on the writer. It allows us to create a space where our traumas, our hopes, our dreams, and our disappointments can live outside of us. As a service member, we often experience and even enact so much death, violence, and trauma. Many of us hold that inside of us and we never really find a release. So in many ways, writing can be a way to kind of heal and better understand ourselves and the world around us. So with that, I'll introduce our amazing panelists for this afternoon. First is Shoshana Johnson, who is an Army veteran and notably the first Black woman prisoner of war in US military history. She has written a book titled I'm Still Standing: From Captive US Soldier to Free Citizen, My Journey Home. And our other panelist is Christopher Paul Wolfe. He is an Army veteran of Operation Iraqi Freedom. He's also the inaugural artist in residence at the Eric H. Holder Jr. Initiative for Civil and Political Rights at Columbia University. He's been published in the New York Times Magazine, Guernica, Bomb, and in 2 anthologies. Welcome to you both, and I'm so excited to speak with you. So I'll dive right in to some of these questions. And really the first question is for both of you panelists. Very few people in their lives become published authors, and that extends obviously to the veteran community. Most of the advice that I got from folks as I transitioned out of the military, it was very practical. No one ever asked me what I wanted to do or what I liked to do. So it's no surprise, and it's really no surprise that writing is kind of seen as a luxury. So how did both of you get the courage to pursue writing, and what advice can you give to service members and veterans who perhaps we never thought being published was possible, or just feel like writing is something that they don't have time for? And I'll start with you, Chris, if you want to take this question first.
Yeah, sure. I guess I'll start by saying, Danielle, thank you for all of the work that you're doing with the Black Veterans Project to advocate for veterans in navigating veterans who are navigating the VA. Yeah, I mean, I know through my personal experience navigating the VA that it's a challenging process, and it's just a huge thing, a meaningful thing to know that that folks like you are out there advocating for all of us. So thank you. Um, well, what I can say about my journey as a writer is that I started writing from a place of pain. I started writing when I was in Iraq. I was at a place where I was just trying to figure out what was going on around me. I wasn't sure how to articulate it, how to process it. This was 2003. I was deployed with the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment out of Fort Carson, Colorado. And yeah, I reached a place where, I was questioning a lot of things. And one day I took all of what I was feeling and I put the pen to the page, and I just began writing. I began writing what some might call poetry, but really they were lyrics. There were some guys who I deployed with who they brought their guitars to Iraq with them, and during our downtime they would play their guitars, and I didn't know how to play. So I was fortunate that some of these guys noticed that I was struggling in that environment, and they reached out to me and said, "Hey, come hang out with us." And as I spent time with them, I decided I wanted to learn how to play too. So I paid one of the Iraqi contractors that was working with us to go to Baghdad. I gave him some money, and when he went on his run to Baghdad to get supplies, he brought back a guitar for me. So I began to play, and as I began to play, I began to write. So the writing kind of came out of that I guess artistic gathering. And when I got back from Iraq, I finished out my time in the military. I put the artistic side of me away because I was a little risk averse to pursue it. Ended up going to business school and worked in finance on Wall Street for a number of years. And actually I started working there in September 2008, which, just from a timing perspective, was when the entire market was crumbling. And I somehow managed to stay in that environment, but it was another challenging environment. And what I found was that while I was there, I began to write again. I began to put the pen to the page again. Out of frustration, out of trying to make sense out of the chaos around me. And through that, I realized that writing was something more than just a pastime. It was something that gave me a sense of purpose. It allowed me to say things that, that just were burning to get out, and allowed me to express myself in a way that made me feel heard, and made me better able to make sense of the world around me. And it was at that point that I had a few conversations with my wife, and eventually made the decision to pursue writing full-time as my vocation. And luckily, I had a pretty big support network. There were veterans in New York City who were part of writing workshops that supported my journey, that encouraged me along the way. Folks like Maurice DeCall, Matt Gallagher, Phil Cly, just read my work, supported the I guess process that I was undergoing, and from that point on, I didn't look back. I actually went to the folks on my job and said, "Hey, I'm leaving to pursue this full time." And a lot of them kind of looked at me like, "You're gonna leave this? Like, what are you gonna do if you're leaving this?" And what I told them, I said, I'm gonna figure it out, because I wasn't at a point where I wanted to tell folks my plan. But to your point, I think writing is it's for me, it's a practice. And with that, it requires certain things that I think, our experience in the military, they serve us well, that discipline, to write constantly. So for me, since I have 3 kids, so for me, that means waking up and writing, from 4:30 until 6 a.m. when they wake up and, the day is underway. So yeah, that's what I would say about kind of my journey into writing and how I managed to kind of get some words out each day.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chris. And I really think that speaks to exactly what I think. I was talking about. We sort of, especially in the environment of the military, there's so many stressors. There's so many things that are asked of us, and I think often we really have to get to a place, and it doesn't have to be writing, where we can get these things out of us, right? We can't, it can't all live within us, like you said, this sort of burning. And I really just, that's just exactly what I think I was getting at. And Shoshana, you wrote your first book, and you said, you weren't really ready to do a book deal. But can you speak a bit about how you came to the decision to kind of document your experiences to actually, put pen to paper and write this book?
Well, it was, someone approached me about it. And my first instinct is to say no, because I don't want to be bothered with all of it. But my parents are really the ones that pushed me to talk. Mm-hmm. One of the things they said is like, you need to write this on paper for your daughter, so she would know what happened to you. And during that time, it's part of, my dad said, it's a part of history. Another thing that really pushed me was the fact that people like to tell me what happened to me. And my experience is like, I don't remember seeing you that day or through my captivity, so how are you telling me what happened to me? Through this experience, I have learned that even though I write my story, I tell my story, there's going to be people in this world who just want to believe what they want to believe. And I had to learn to just live in my own truth. And I know what happened to me from my point of view. From people's other point of view, they can see it how they like. But I put it on paper. It's there. It's there for my daughter, my nieces, nephews, and down the line for my family. But it was very difficult reliving some of those experiences. The ghostwriter, co-writer, Mary Doyle, is an Army veteran herself. She got out of the military and went to work for the Department of Defense and Public Affairs. It was so easy to tell her some of the things because, with our acronyms and, things like that. And she knew which buttons to push to get more information and make it easier for the general public to understand. But, I think it's important for everyone to share their experiences. It's how we come together as a people. There are people that will never really understand what it's like to be in the military, to be in the military as a person of color, or be in the military as a female person of color. I can't go around the world telling each individual my story, but I put it down on paper. So if they have the curiosity and want to learn, they can read it and take it in and make their own judgment. So I'm very glad I did it. Obviously, I didn't do it for the money because ain't no money coming here. It was all about hopefully telling people, especially young Black people, what it was like for me. And maybe they could look at people that came before me and see how it changed for me, and then how they can help change it for the next generation.
Thank you, Shoshana. I kind of want to expand on what you were talking about there with one, I think just the courage that it takes to sort of write your story. And I think the next level of courage is to put it out there for other people to peruse, to critique, right, to deny, but also hopefully to glean, hope from. And so my next question really is, I think, also for both of you, because you both, in your work and in this talk, you've been very candid about the duality, that sort of exists between being Black and serving in the military, serving your country. And I've often remarked that I believe there's no greater patriot than the Black American. We've fought in every war that this country, has had, and often still been systemically excluded, from full citizenship in this country. So for both of you, and I'll start with you, Shoshana, if you'd like. How do you, if at all, reconcile, this duality?
It's hard. I remember getting an email after I put out the book and everything from a gentleman who said it hurt him that I was collecting benefits from the military. And not because I did something to dishonor the military or the uniform, just because I was Black. So although I contributed, although I was injured, all of those things, he thought I should be denied benefits because I was Black. So, it's hard to deal with kind of stuff like that. And then I made a comment about him not understanding the military. He says he's a Vietnam veteran. So that hurts even worse, because you understand the struggle of being in the military. And you think I don't deserve what I have because of my color? Come on. It hurts his soul, and I don't think people already understand that. It really does hurt his soul when you hear things like that. But it also makes me want to push harder. I can't let this negativity impact what I can contribute, not just to the country, but to the Black community, to the female community, and the immigrant community. I'm an immigrant to this nation, yet I put on the uniform and willing to spill my blood and die for it. I think that people really need to open their eyes. They like to say, oh, freedom isn't free. I said, but do you really understand the cost? Do you understand that what it is we did as veterans? And then when you talk about being a minority veteran, we did twice as much, because all the things we accomplished are still thrown in our face just because of the color of our skin.
I think what you're remarking on, sorry, go ahead.
It makes me fight back and continue to talk as much as I do, because there are days when I feel like I don't want to leave my house and I don't want to leave my bed, much less to speak to people and to deal with it, is the fact that if I don't say anything, it won't get better. And I have my nieces, nephews, cousins, and all that stuff. I have to make it better for them, because the people that came before me died and fought hard to make sure it was better for me.
And Shoshana, what you're speaking of is sort of, something that, could really be its own, panel discussion, which is, I think, sort of this burden that we all sort of feel like we have to carry, whether we are, sort of first generation Americans or first generation college students, if we are Black, if we are queer, sort of this mantle, right, that we have a responsibility to, those who, I don't believe anyone doesn't have a voice, but those who are not, able to sort of speak up and don't have the platform or the opportunities that we have. And I really think, that's sort of an added pressure that we often don't think about, right? There's so much is being asked of all service members, let's be honest. But I think that, those are added things that we often, those are intangible. Those are things we can't see and that we often don't talk about, right? Because we're all blue or we're all green. But, the truth is we are sort of not a monolith. And Christopher, I'll turn it over to you to answer that question, if you will.
Sure, Danielle. When I think about that question, my mind sort of hones in on that word reconcile, right? Reconcile to cause to coexist in harmony, right? And when I think about just the history, right? You think about the genocide of the indigenous. You think about the enslavement of Africans. You think about Black Americans being terrorized and exploited and murdered during Reconstruction. You think about Jim Crow, you think about separate but equal. You think about GIs being denied their benefits, the GI Bill benefits coming back from World War II. You know, my grandfather served in World War II. My father served in the Army for 22 years as an infantry officer, right? So when you think about that history and how it contributes to all that folks of color, people of color are navigating and dealing with today, mass incarceration, right? So I teach a creative writing class to incarcerated folks at Rikers Island Jail. In the unit that I'm working with right now is the veteran housing unit. And when I walk into that unit and I see every person that's in that class is a person of color that's in that creative writing class. And, you know, when I think about that, right, and also couple that with the contributions of Black folks to this country, to the military. You think about Colonel Charles Young, you know, think about the work that you're doing. There's disharmony when I think about that. You know, I don't think there's a way for, you know, those things to coexist in harmony. And, you know, I think to Shoshana's point, what we can do is show up. What we can do is use our words and deeds to shape our environment, shape society, shape the military into what we want it to be. So, you know, I think that that's kind of how I try to process it. I think that that's where some of the writing comes from. You know, it's me trying to work it out on the page. I think some of the writing in and of itself is addressing that inability to reconcile on the page, just letting that thought process show up, you know, and acknowledge that there's, you know, there is at times confusion, there's disappointment, there is disharmony, in letting that exist on the page. And hopefully someone reads it and they can, you know, maybe relate to it, maybe it resonates, and through that, hopefully start a conversation and a conversation that leads to action, that leads to change.
Yeah. And I would be remiss if I didn't, you know, kind of call out really some of the things that you both have mentioned and the words that come to mind with the experience just in this, that you've talked about just in this last question, disharmony, confusion, Shoshana, fear, sometimes not wanting to leave your house, you know, the struggles, the moving forward that you both are, you know, talking about comes at a cost, and it's a high one. And I think, you know, that it really informs my next question, which is, you know, I'll start with you, Shoshana. You've been such an advocate for veterans to seek help for PTSD and for, you know, all sorts of mental health issues, and have opened up even in this talk here in the few minutes that we've had together about your own struggles. And I think in recent years, you know, the topic of mental health, you know, has sort of been at the forefront of many people's minds. And, you know, especially given the last 2+ years in a global pandemic. So what are some of the, I guess, positive changes you've seen being made in the military and veteran landscape, Shoshana? And where do you kind of still see things, issues, you know, that need to be addressed?
Well, I think for the military, anybody, now people are willing to talk more and admit that they're having issues, mental health issues.
Coming just now.
And just for the audience's awareness, Shoshana has joined us. She's sort of in the middle of a family emergency. And so she has so graciously joined us. So she may be popping in and out here. So just wanted to let the audience know. Okay, awesome.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Oh, goodness. This probably can add to that, this experience. First of all, people are willing to speak about it more, but they're not willing to, I'd say, admit how much therapy they need. They'll talk to a group and, oh, I'm in this Facebook group and we talk to each other. And sometimes they're not willing to acknowledge that they need more than that. I think there's definite changes and improvements need to be made, not just for the military, but for nationwide. We have a massive shortage of mental health care professionals within the country. I think we need to work on more incentives for especially minorities to go into the mental health care profession. Sometimes you need to speak to someone who looks like you so you can feel more at ease sharing your deepest worries. That becomes a big thing. And also we need to look at different things that can help the individual, especially military. Within the military, we have so many different dynamic people who have joined, from Native American to different ethnicities that are actually foreign born. So their culture is totally different. So then their need for mental health care then becomes different. You have to go beyond the surface, and I think we need to open that up much more, especially with our veterans. It was nothing for you to sign these immigrants, minorities, culturally diverse people to go fight your war. But now that they're back and they need a specialized care, you're hesitant in going into the untraditional marketplace to look for it. And that's not fair and it's not right. And they deserve better. If they were willing to die for you, the fact that they came home and need some help, you need to look into every avenue possible to give them that help. And I really believe that can be a wonderful way to help our veterans. I am very open and honest with the fact that I do have PTSD. I've been hospitalized 3 times. There is no shame. I went through this trauma serving this nation. And I don't feel that I should be ashamed that as a human being, I am dealing with the after effects of some of the hard things that I saw and the experiences I had in defense. So I always encourage people to reach out for help. And if they have a family member, sometimes you are suffering just as much as they are. I've noticed it within my own family, large military family, that someone suffering mental health illness, it's not just about them. It's about all the people that they touch on a regular basis that either can help or hurt them, but also are suffering also.
Yeah. No, I love that you brought that up, Shoshana. I think you're right that there is sort of this larger, and it may even be surface level conversation, that's happening, I think, writ large, within our country, but also within the veteran community. There's a campaign that talks about, 22 veterans a day that lose their lives to suicide. But it's, what you're talking about is really like experience, how the various intersections of who we are really play into what our experiences are in these various institutions, and the fact that, folks need specialized care, and that could be racial trauma. There is a new, there is sort of a new campaign within the VA that some therapists are trying to. Oh, hi, Shoshana. She's joined us on camera. Thank you for being able to join us. but a campaign to also consider like racial trauma within treatment, for veterans, and not just PTSD, but for anxiety, for depression, sort of all of these things that really that play into what it is to be a part of these institutions. So I've talked enough. I'll turn it over to you, Chris, if you'd like to say anything.
Well, no, I mean, I think at most, Danielle, I can just echo what you and Shoshana have already said. I know through my own experiences how challenging it is to navigate through the VA. I know what it feels like trying to unpack one's experience, my experience with someone that I didn't necessarily feel like I could relate to, and it to a certain extent, I would say just delay the healing process, and it's ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
It's ongoing, and what I would say is, again, I think Shoshana just she hit it, just in that the representation is necessary. I think that being able to access folks outside the system itself, outside the VA system itself. I know from my experience, at times there's the fact that I was speaking to someone that was part of the system,
mm-hmm.
right? And I think that a little bit of separation can help as well to enable someone to enable me to feel vulnerable enough in that space to unpack my experience. So it's been challenging. I know that I got out of the military in 2006, and it wasn't until during the pandemic that I personally sought out help. So I would imagine that there are other folks out there that need that help, and we should be doing all that we can to ensure that they get it, that they can access a space where they can be vulnerable enough to just kind of grapple with what they're dealing with.
Yeah. And it's amazing to me because I've sat on my fair share of panels, veteran panels, and it is always interesting when I think back to those panels, and I think back to the different experiences and answers to questions like this that different folks have. And almost overwhelmingly, when I talk to Black veterans, there is there is a certain level of a lack of trust, and a feeling of that the military and the VA, a lack of care has been administered to people. And so it definitely highlights what I think is a real sort of divide, but also even a civilian and military, divide. In recent years, the military has become one of the most trusted institutions in this country. A Pew Research poll in I believe 2009 said that the military is one of the most trusted institutions. And after I think the last couple of years, with sort of a national racial reckoning that we've had, most notably, the military, and most notably the Navy, has put together task forces to study race within the military and barriers for service members and veterans, and have really been lauded for taking this initiative and for taking sort of these steps. I think two things. What we're seeing here is probably in real time the civilian and military divide, right? That folks outside, only 2% of people serve, in the military in this country. So that in itself, I think, speaks to sort of a lack of understanding, rightfully so. And then I think too, it also speaks to a lack of transparency that the military and the veteran landscape can have. If only 2% of people even know how systems work and know how sort of things operate, is it really possible for real oversight and for real change to even take place? So really my question to both of you is, sort of given the nature of the military and its separation, from civilian, life, what do you feel like true change within the military? And I know that's sort of a charged word, change, but, what does this look like within the military and veteran, systems, and what would it look like when it comes to combating issues of systemic racism? Is it really possible for real oversight and for real change to take place? And I'll start with you, Chris.
Well, what I would say, Danielle, is that I think for real change to happen, it needs to go beyond transactional change, right? And when I say transactional, I mean change that doesn't get to the actual power dynamic and power differentials that exist, right? I think that transformational change will address the power dynamics, right? When it comes to systemic oppression. And for me, whenever I walk into a room, right? Whenever I walk into a room, I ask myself, how did this room end up looking like this? Right? Whether it's when I was walking into a meeting in the talk, when I worked on Wall Street, when I walked into my banking floor, when I walk into a classroom at Columbia, when I walk into a classroom at Rikers, how did this room end up looking like this? Right? And one thing I can say in all of those experiences is that when I was in a room when there was a concentration of power and resources, there wasn't a whole lot of color in that room. Right. And so for me, true change, transformational change comes when we look at that power dynamic and actually do things that address that power dynamic to ensure that those that are most affected by the system, negatively affected by the system, are the ones empowered to actually change the system, so that we have end result outcomes that that positively impact their lives. So, I think that's kind of the place to start. As folks are sitting down to put together whatever that plan is. Whether it's a task force, right? Who's deciding how long that task force? Even though the term task force, it's like, okay, who decides when the task is done? When the goal is met. And when we think about systemic racism and its roots, we're talking about, in America anyway, centuries, right? So to me, anything that we incorporate and want to institute, I'm thinking that it's going to need to be there for a while, right? To ensure that it's constantly addressed, that folks are in the room that consistently have that lens, a lens of looking at systemic oppression, whether that deals with race, gender, sexual orientation, that consistently walk into the room with that lens on and can ask, okay, like, whose voice is not represented in this room? Whose perspective and life experience is not represented in the room? And what's the result of that? What's the impact that has? And actually doing something about it. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. I think what you're talking about really is hitting at this idea of sort of, performative actions that I really think we've seen in the last, a couple of years, 2.5 years, so to speak, since, 2020. We have seen a lot of folks ask questions, I think, of themselves, which is good, which is amazing, and ask, what can we do differently? Having consulted on a couple of those task forces, I can tell you that what you're hitting at, sort of this transformational change, this really empowering people, is what's missing, in empowering people who are not currently empowered. And I think that it is what I've seen is a very sort of reactive way of moving forward. It is, how do we, instead of how do we transform sort of this system, which I think in itself requires us to question.
Absolutely.
And I think that in itself is it's very hard when you're in an environment, a system, just a way of being and of thinking that says don't question, do, and do it, with a quickness. And so I think that in itself lends it lets me know that perhaps if I am in this mode of just doing, of not questioning, and that's sort of my modus operandi, and I don't really operate outside of that, then one, I think that means that I have to, somebody else has to come in who is not sort of ingrained in that culture and ingrained in this way of thinking, right, to help me. It doesn't mean that, we're sort of incapable. It just means that somebody else who has not sort of been indoctrinated into that needs to come in, which one, I think was a really big problem and continues to be a problem, with the military. And often words are thrown around like civilian military divide, but I like to, define what does that mean? And I think this is a great example of what that means is folks, I don't want a person who's never served a day in the military to come in and to, talk to me about systemic racism, or to talk to me about organizational change, or, any of those things. So that is, one really issue that I've seen, and a real barrier, I think, to transformational change. And Shoshana, what about you? What do you think real change looks like?
Well, I think you've seen, going back and forth between the 6 and not 6, some of the change. It was very good to see General Milley get up in front of Congress talking about, if I can read about the experiences of a Black man and it can give me knowledge of how he thinks in order to know him better in the military, why shouldn't I do it? Knowledge is knowledge. So with Secretary Austin and General Milley there, I can see where we're going forward, but we need to make some of those changes in the lower ranks as the military, first and foremost. Some of the people that end up getting those promotions, it can't be that good old boy system of I knew him when he was a young lieutenant and he should get it. It shouldn't be on that. It's completely on merit. And I think we still have a big problem with that. And being that, we're going to have the traditional white male leading constantly because they interact with each other and do that kind of thing. If you do it totally on merit instead of who you know, then we can have a better outlook. That's one little thing. But also making sure the leadership within the military, like General Milley says, get some knowledge. Try to understand not just the mission, but the people that serve underneath you, that serve with you. Understand their experiences. Because when it gets down and dirty, that's the person to your left and your right that you need to depend on. And the better you know them, the better you can understand how to get the mission done. If that's all you're worried about, just getting the mission done, that alone can get the mission done correctly and quickly. But on top of that, it will let you know who they are as a human being, to understand the struggle of being a minority, being a female, and so forth in the military, strengthens your leadership. So for me, the way to make that change going forward is for them to really dig deeper in the knowledge. Dig deeper in the knowledge. Because I want to, like Chris said, you go into a room and you look at how did this dynamic be that way? Some of them walk into the room and don't see anything wrong. I need for them to walk into the room and see that it's all white and say something's wrong.
Yeah.
I need that for that to happen. And the only way they're going to gain that insight is through education and knowledge.
Yeah, no, I absolutely think that what you both are hitting on here is a lot of a lot of what is sort of happening is, how do we sort of increase diversity and inclusion? How do we get more folks into this system? And then maybe by default, the system will change, right? That if we just are able to get the numbers in and get more people to join, then the system will change. What we're not looking at is the overwhelming number of folks that are leaving, why they are leaving. And I think that, if you're putting people into a system, we already know that inherently is violent. We know that this sort of the objective of war is violent, and there is never an army that is solely for the purpose of peacekeeping. But if we are also putting folks, we are asking so much of people who are in these institutions, who are in the military, and we're also saying that not only are you going and enacting violence, but the system is going to be violent to you. I don't think we can expect folks to want to stick around and for real change to take place. And I think that we're just going to see an influx of folks that are saying, I don't want to participate in this, violent system, especially when it's asking so much. I can go and do, sort of a 9 to 5, with the same, sort of thing where I'm not being asked to sort of put my life on the line. So I actually want to kind of get to another question, and it is, last year we officially pulled out of the war in Afghanistan, marking the end of 20 years, 2/4 of my life. And some veterans, quite right, had a lot of feelings. Some were upset, some were sad, some were questioning if the high toll of, human life was worth it, given the outcome and the high toll of human life all around, not just for Americans. And, what were some of your, for both of you, what were some of your emotions and thoughts at the time regarding the withdrawal? And, have you put any of those thoughts to paper? And I'll start with you, Shoshana.
Well, I haven't put anything to paper. That's not my thing. But, I think it definitely could have been handled better. But I also believe you couldn't stay forever. Was the cost worth it? There are a lot of little kids at the time that the conflict started in Afghanistan who are now adults, and they've lived a life without the Taliban. They've been able to express themselves, educate themselves, and live a certain way. They wouldn't have had that if the United States hadn't been there. So their dynamic, their thought process is changed forever. So even as the Taliban comes in and tries to exert its control, we've seen a resistance to that because of the experiences those younger people have had for this freedom. So I think it was worth it in that aspect. They've had a taste of a certain kind of freedom, and I doubt they'll ever want to go back. So it's something that we've given to them. What they do from there is really up to them. I know there are plenty of people who have lost loved ones and comrades during this conflict and maybe question it, but think of all the things that these younger people have experienced that would have never been experienced if we hadn't been there. That's the only way, for me to make sense of it. We've given them a glimpse. Now they can take that glimpse and make it a reality for them. And I believe they can. Is it going to be overnight? No, it's not going to be overnight. It's going to be a long haul for them. I see that real easy. But once you get a glimpse of the sunlight, you don't ever want to go back to the dark. I think for me, it kind of compares to the civil rights movement. They always talk about segregation and stuff like that. Let's be real. We walk in the same footsteps now. We're never there's no way Black America is ever going back to segregation and Jim Crow. We're going to fight like hell to make sure we don't go back. And now that is the same for the people in Afghanistan. Do you want to go back to that form of Jim Crow? We've given a glimpse of what it could be like. Now they have to make it a reality.
Yeah, no, I thank you for that. And I think, that is, something that I didn't really consider. We often talk about, or we often think about, we look through a lens of ourselves, of Americans, of American veterans. But, you have done a difficult task of putting yourself in their shoes and in saying, being able to sort of empathize and sympathize with them and say that, understand that their lives are forever changed and understand really to have a hope of what it could look like. And I think for a lot of folks, that is hard, that is a hard task to sort of keep that hope and that positive outlook. So I really, I appreciate, that outlook and sort of giving me a new perspective. So I'll move to you, Chris.
Yeah, Danielle, I guess I would want to start by just reiterating something you just said, Danielle, which is, just thank you, Shoshana, for sharing that perspective and just illuminating some things for me, because I think, the phrase you used, Shoshana, as you talked about it, you said, making sense. As I watched it, it was definitely a moment, and it still is a moment that as I see it, I'm just trying to make sense of it, and as I was watching it, I recall thinking back to my deployment. I deployed to Iraq in March of 2003, and I was in Iraq until April of 2004, I believe. And I just recall this question that I constantly heard some of the soldiers I served with ask, which is, why are we here? Right? Looking for WMD. There's no WMD. Okay, so why are we here? Right? Well, we're looking for Saddam. Found his sons. All right, so why are we here? Right? And then at some point, the response became from some folks was, remember 9/11. Right? And I guess what I'm trying to say is that again, it was a moment where I was trying to make sense of what I was seeing, just as, when I was in Iraq, my soldiers and I were trying to make sense of what we were experiencing. And I think it's the withdrawal out of Afghanistan is one that makes me think of the word accountability. Who are we accountable to? Thinking about the lives lost and the families who have suffered as a result, and just what we were working towards, the question of what we were working towards. And again, Shoshana, I think that what you said is a good reminder of what we were trying to work towards. And I don't know, I guess what the pervading kind of thought in my mind is just the importance of a conversation like this, where folks like you all can, remind me, because it there is, again, that, and there's an element of confusion. There is wanting to make sense of what I was seeing as I watched the withdrawal. So that's what I have to say about it.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I think that there's perhaps no resolution even, that can be gleaned. There isn't perhaps a pretty package that we can, put this in and, conclude, And it really is about just trying to make sense of a lot of things, to make sense of things that seem much bigger than ourselves. And it, I appreciate both of your candid responses, because I think it just highlights for me that, one, it could change, right? The ways in which we make sense of things can change over time. And perhaps what I thought, when I served, and the things that I believed may not be the things that I believe today, or the things, that I believed August 31st of 2021, when the last American soldier, left Afghanistan. And I think that it really just highlights that perhaps just leaving room and space, for ourselves to continue to try, to continue to make sense, to continue to, I think in Shoshana's case, to hope, to continue, in some cases, maybe to be angry, and to leave room for that, to be upset, to be sad, to mourn. And I think what you said, Chris, is a really important part, but perhaps in all of that, to come together, and perhaps there is some consolation that can be had, doing all of that together, mourning together, trying to hope together. So I really, really appreciate both of you for for talking about that. I am going to move to a question that I really just have for Shoshana. One of the things that I always felt like was missing from my education at the Naval Academy and in the fleet was a perspective of a woman. We had plenty of sort of leadership talks and classes and things like that, but I really felt like I was ill prepared when I stepped on board my first ship 30 days after graduating from the Naval Academy. And the experiences that I would have, even talking to fellow Black officers, fellow Black male officers, was so different. And I mean, some things were definitely the same, and some things were very similar, and where we could sort of relate to each other. But there were just noticeable differences. And I mean, in your writing, and even in some of your talks, Shoshana, you've written and talked, thoughtfully about balancing what you call, remaining feminine, while also, proving your value, during that deployment, during your deployment, during your Army experience, writ large. And you've also talked about, that this is the first war in which women played a large role in serving in combat, and in combat adjacent, positions. And so, how can you speak a bit to this possibly tension, even in what it really means to be a soldier, a sailor, to be in the military, to be in a predominantly not only male dominated, but even in the ways in which we think about, the military history, the images that we see, that we even conjure in our own minds, typically don't look like me or you. And so how did you, and how maybe do you continue to manage that duality or that tension, between being a woman in a world that really seems made for men?
Oh, that one is still a struggle, because even in the VA system, they automatically say Mr. Johnson instead of Ms. Johnson. But all you can do is be present and show up. At the time I served, especially during Iraq and stuff, my ideals of what femininity is has changed. It evolved, and it's different for every woman. So we have to really talk to the fact that femininity for me is not the same for the next woman, and it's okay. We don't have to conform to a certain standard for that. And we don't also have to conform to a certain standard as a military female. There's always that, oh, but you don't look like you would be a soldier. I say, so what does being a female soldier look like? It shouldn't look like anything except what I say I am, I'm telling you what I am. There's no reason to question that. And I think that's something not just men need to work on. I think females need to work on it also. You know, we tend to hold each other back, and I don't know why, or maybe it's that thought that only one woman can be at the top, so we try and keep the others down, and we've got to let go of that and make space for each other and give support to each other. For me, that's femininity. Being able to help another sister out, no matter what color they are, because like you said, you know, you talk to your Black male counterpart, and it's a different experience for them than it is for you. So embrace your uniqueness as a female of color, and use it as a strength, because it means you know two sides of the story. The minority side, as far as color, religion, and so forth, and then the gender side. And realize that's your strength, and you can use that to move forward. I really, I think the military has so much more work to do as far as embracing females in the workplace. I really, during my military career, I really strove hard not to be seen as the weak female. Even during my captivity, my capture, I remember thinking that I wasn't going to cry until one of the males cried first, and I held on. You know, the men broke down before I did, a couple of them. But why was that one of my thoughts instead of, you know, I'm just going home? I'm sure the men didn't think about the fact that they have to hold on to their, you know, masculinity. They were just happy to be going home, and when the moment came, they teared up. So that pressure, I think we sometimes put it on ourselves, and we need to shake it in order to stand firm in our commitment of who we are and what we can contribute, not just in the military, but in every aspect. Contribute to our society, to our families, our friends. We need to say that I'm enough. I don't have to add on extra stoic faith in order to complete this job or to do this profession. We are enough just the way we are. We are individuals, and the fact that we have to deal with our minority racism on top of it makes us even a little bit stronger, and embrace it and go forward. Yeah, the military has a long way to go, but one of the main things in order to fix it is for females to stand together. We really need to stand side by side. One of the best things that happened to me during my military career is I encountered a lot of females that were higher ranked that would give me advice here and there, and little things that made a difference in how I was able to serve. And I appreciate the fact that they were willing to share that knowledge, and it made a difference in my life. So share knowledge. That's the biggest thing.
Thank you so much, Shoshana. I really think, what you're saying is exactly what I really wanted to highlight here is, I talked about sort of always feeling like in my mind, the image of a soldier or patriot that I and probably a lot of other folks have in their head in this country doesn't look like me, and often doesn't look like a woman. And I know we know here that that no one group or person is a monolith. Each of us occupies a multifaceted space in life. So perhaps we are or were a soldier, a sailor, a Marine, but we're also a Black man, a queer woman, and all of these parts shape us and our experiences in these various institutions. This country is asking people to put their entire selves in the line of fire. So how then can we dictate the manner in which those we are asking such a tremendous sacrifice from, that they conceal the core parts of who they are? So thank you both for adding your voices to a very short list, of Black veteran writers who are helping what I believe is really an uncovering of experiences that is so vital in a world where we desperately need to better understand ourselves and others. So I'll turn it over to Kate to give her closing remarks. Thank you both again.
Yeah, thank you so much to both of our panelists and also to you, Danielle. You did an excellent job as moderator. We appreciate that all three of you shared such personal experiences, but we're also able to speak to some of the broader systemic issues and policy issues that can move forward. And we commit to that in our research as we continue to move forward. Thank you to all of our audience members who've joined as part of this discussion. The link to this discussion will be available online, and we can send out a follow-up email to everyone who's participated today, encapsulating all of the links to the work, not only of Chris and Shoshana, but also to Danielle's work as well. And we very much appreciate you joining in this conversation. And we urge you to continue this important work moving forward. So thank you to everyone, to our panelists, to our moderator, and to our audience. Have a great day.